Drawing board as a competition, I've been listening to from Sanjay Moe for a pretty long time now. Got personally involved with it last year when two students from our college won commendation prize last year. So that's when it became a little more personal. Had a general idea about it, but not directly involved. Once these people won an award and got back and put up their sheets in the exhibition, that's when you actually knew what this was all about. And surprisingly, this time when he called to ask if he would want to be a juror, didn't even want to blink an eye, blindly accepted that proposal. That's where the story of drawing board comes in. That's what we were debating amongst the jurors today morning when we were coming to this venue for the jury. All three of us were of this opinion that for a student, even in the fourth or final year, it is not an easy subject because one, the site has so many layers. It's got culture, it's got history, it's a difficult climate to work in. As a student, to address all these layers simultaneously at the same time is not something which a student is equipped to in the 3 or 4 years of training. And it was more a discussion amongst the three of us. The students were unfortunately used as props in some ways to understand what are the issues being discussed here, and because of the complexity of the problem and the possibilities that it threw up, it raised the level of discussion to the level of a professional discussion where one is dealing with issues of heritage and culture and what is a museum and what is not a museum and how do we look at things displayed, how do people come into the whole thing. There are so many issues that were discussed which sometimes are, I think, not even at the level of a studio where one would discuss this in class. But because it was a competition and the students had produced such wonderful work, the discussion moved up to that level. The 10 selected entries were equally diverse. That was the best part of the 10 entries, that each one had something to say which was very different from the other. And that diversity was what made the jury so interesting today, because one was trying to look at potential of where a particular thread of thought or a particular idea could be pushed to the limit. So exciting to see how does one push the envelope with this idea and where does this idea then lead? Because professionally, maybe all of us were debating, even if we were given a project like this to work with, I don't think any of us has the capacity to work at 10 different ideas for the same project with the same brief at the same time. 1, 2 probably, but 10, I don't think so it would have been possible. So that was the exciting part, to see that if 10 different ideas have equal validity and potential to be taken forward, then how do you identify the potential of that idea and see where it goes? And that was the exciting part of the jury today. Not so much about finding faults with what people had done, but rather to see the potential of what each of these ideas had and how does that potential then manifest itself if that idea is pushed forward. So that was the power of these 10 schemes. Now see, three of us come with 3 different backgrounds. Sherman is a landscape architect, Durganand comes with a very strong theoretical background of looking at things, and I come from partly academic and partly professional background. So the way each one of us responds to a particular topic or a particular point of view is drastically different sometimes. So to reconcile that and absorb our own differences, saying that if I am reacting to a scheme in a particular manner and X or Sherman is looking at it differently, and if Durganand is looking at it differently, then how do the three of us reconcile and say that can we three come on the same page, or do we hold our differences and agree to disagree? So there were quite a few schemes where we agreed to disagree and left it there and didn't bother to bring it to one page. There were some schemes where we were on the same page, but there are quite a few schemes where we agreed to disagree and leave it at that and not resolve our differences. Like I said, when you have 10 different points of view and each one is inclined to look at, for example, Sherman would look at a scheme from the landscape perspective and say that I look at it as a landscape project and I see the potential in it as a landscape project and see where it goes. But at the same time, I am looking at the same scheme from an architectural perspective, saying landscape is one part of it, but there is also a building and there is also other issues involved, and architecturally, how has the person resolved it, landscape being one part of it. So these differences would show up in the discussion in terms of how each one is then responding to a particular idea or a particular scheme. And that was the argument or that was the debate between the three of us all the time, saying that if X is defending it and Y is finding a fault with it and somebody else is finding it's extremely good, then do we resolve it and come to a conclusion, or do we leave those differences like that? And most of the time we left it like that. We didn't want to resolve them, because resolving them, then somebody has to then compromise, saying that okay, I'll hold my guns and it's okay if you do what you're saying. We decided not to resolve it and leave it at the point where each one of us believed in what we saw in those schemes. But all of us unanimously agreed that all the 10 schemes at least brought those issues up for a discussion. and they had brought it to the level where a discussion could start. Sometimes schemes, especially by students, are at the level where they are barely resolved, and then one stops the discussion because it is not talking of any further layers. By and large, I would say all the 10 schemes were presented extremely well, both in the terms of drawing content. Some of them had walkthroughs, some of them had models, and by and large, all of them had got the narrative right. Each one of them took their 10-15 minutes, had prepared very clearly in terms of what they wanted to say. Thank you so much. Great to be here. Had a ball of a time.